Welcome back to Behind the Screen, where I take you behind the DM screen in my campaign, The Five Kingdoms. Hi, I'm Patrick Johnson. When last we left our heroes, they had just finished off a Beholder and a Death Tyrant to the surprise of their DM, me. So everybody had got up from the table and left. So when they come back to the game table again a month later, they search this cavern. And of course, they're looking for the treasure. Beholder, of course, is going to have treasure. It's a huge monster that they just killed. And eventually, after searching down the different chutes and up the different ladders and through the different rooms and whatnot, they find at the bottom of one of the shafts where the Beholder's been keeping all of his or her treasure. Now, in the treasure, they find an emerald ring on a orc skeleton that's at the bottom of the shaft. They find a book that looks very valuable. It appears to be a book about the history of the Five Kingdoms from about 800 years ago. They find a tapestry, which is valuable as well. They find a small wooden box with a deck of cards and a couple vials, a scroll, and they find a broken stone tablet. But the most important piece they find is, of course, the tablet. Now, the tablet is it's the second tablet of the two-tablet prophecy that the High Priestess of the Elves wrote so that they would play their part in this game. And their part, that the High Priestess wants them to play, is to help defend the Obsidian Castle and the Crystal City. So without the second part, however, the prophecy doesn't really exactly read the same. The second part, which is the answer back to the prayer in the first part, it doesn't appear to be much on its own. It's kind of very cryptic. But when paired with the first part, it makes the first part mean slightly, a slightly different thing. It points out the fact that the orcs' actual enemies are the Yank and Zer, or the Githyanki and the Githzeri. And then it asks them to be the hero. And between the two of those things, the orcs were supposed to believe that they were supposed to protect the Crystal City. And so not having the second piece of the tablet is the reason why the orcs came up underneath Tor and attacked humankind, because without the second tablet, the first tablet to them reads like, when the firefalls start up, we're supposed to come up and attack humankind and, claim our destiny as rulers. So obviously that's bad. Now the characters have found the tablet. They don't know what it is yet. The box containing the deck of cards, though, is very interesting, and I made a prop for this just to kind of show it off and make sure they knew it was something special. And of course, I expect them to think it's a deck of many things, and it's something very similar. I call it a deck of wonders. It's slightly different than the deck of many things. It's not quite as deadly, not quite as great either, but each card has a positive and a negative aspect. The positive aspect, generally speaking, usually happens nearly immediately, or it gives the character something they can use now or at some time shortly in the future. And then the negative aspect is something that might happen immediately or might happen at a later time. And then the ring is important because it is the Orc Chieftain's ring from back in the day when the Orcs moved over to this side of the Five Kingdoms, and they brought the two tablets, and that is when the female tablet bearer fell down the shaft because she was pushed by a Drow elf who, of course, knowing what the High Priestess was up to, wanted to mess with it a little bit and make it not turn out right. And seemed quite successful so far, obviously. So the Drow elf pushed the orc tablet bearer down the shaft where the tablet bearer landed, died, and the tablet broke in half, and there it sat until the Beholder took over this lair and then started using that spot for its treasure hoard. So they find all that stuff. They find 300 rubies, which in my campaign is what gold pieces are called, and they take it all with them. Now they make their way up out of the Beholder's lair, and they get all the way up through the shaft by climbing up a rope. And they get to the top, and now they can see from the top, they can see the firefalls off to their right, which is a giant lava flow that comes down the mountain, and it just continues on and on and on and never stops. And they come up through this hole that is right in the center of this plateau where these three giant stone swords are in the ground, hilt up. They're about 50 feet tall. Obviously not a natural formation. They must have been sculpted, but they're an amazing sculpture that the characters find themselves sitting in. And they take all that in, and then they realize, one of them realizes that they could have used the vision stone to check on these items, and maybe it would work for items too, and not just for people. So they decide to go back down, put all the items in between, one at a time between the columns while they look at the vision stone, which, as I mentioned in the previous video, was originally what I thought they would use the vision stone for. So I was glad they thought of that and went down there and tried it out. So by doing so, they got to get a vision of the tablet being made, and they look over the shoulder of this elf, and the elf turns her head a little bit, and they can see a younger version of the high priestess. So now they know the high priestess made the orc prophecy, which is an interesting piece of information that they did not necessarily need to complete the quest, but gives them more insight into what's actually going on. They also try all the other items. The most important thing they found out was when they put the ring in between the two columns, they found out that it belonged to the orc chieftain, which is important. I don't know if they're going to realize it's important, but that's a big key for them to be able to prove that the tablet is on the up and up if they try and take this back to the current orc chieftain and try and convince him to complete his end of the prophecy. And, as it says, to be the hero that saves the 5 kingdoms. Oh, and I almost forgot to mention that Cirilla, who is being played by Zenobia, and Cirilla is the NPC that Zenobia is dreaming of at this point, Cirilla gets the box of cards, the Deck of Wonders, and she opens the box and she decides to take one card. So she takes one card out and she draws it out and she gets a card called Fire/Passion. Now this is a special set of tarot cards that I bought. I believe it's called an Earth Magic set. And most of them have a first thing, second thing, like Fire/Passion. Now what's really funny about her drawing Fire/Passion is that it's one of about 4 or 5 cards that somehow got mixed into that deck that I did not intend to be in there. All the other cards that are in the deck, I had something figured out for them, what they were supposed to do. So she draws Fire/Passion. I look at my chart and I'm like, yeah, don't have that one. So I had to make it up on the spot. It wasn't too hard. Fire/Passion, that kind of drew me in a certain direction. So I said that gives her the ability to throw a fireball free of charge once in the next 3 days. Now that's the positive aspect of it. The negative aspect of it that she is not aware of yet is that the next time she goes to sleep, when she wakes up, the first person that she sees, she is going to fall in love with, and she'll be in love with that person for 24 hours unless she makes a pretty high saving throw. So that's a little fun I get to look forward to, and it'll be interesting to see if after that happens, if they have any idea why that happens to her, because it's going to happen the next time she wakes up, so not necessarily connected in their mind with her drawing the card. So that's a little fun I get to have with the Deck of Wonders. Each time they draw a card, I get to play a little game with them until they figure out there's a negative aspect to each of the cards. Now, just before they go to sleep up on the plateau, once they go back up there with all their items, they have a discussion at the table trying to figure out how many days it's actually been since they were in Prince Larkin's group and experienced him beheading the kid. And there's some confusion about this. It takes them a while, and I think if I remember correctly, I helped them out a little bit too, before they figure out that it's been about 5 days since that time. And that points out a little something to me about this experiment that I'm running. It is very difficult for the players to keep track of all the places they've been, who they are at each point, and how long it's been. So something for me to keep in mind as I'm going forward, try and keep it straight for them and help them out in any way I can. And of course, my plan is probably to run this campaign again for some other group, and learning as I go for this group is going to help me make it easier on the next group to keep everything straight. All the characters, except for whoever's on watch, which we didn't bother to worry about, all the characters go to sleep, including Jeff. So, of course, they wake up somewhere else again. And in this case, I went to Athena in the Crystal City. Now, her group hasn't done anything yet, but she's had a few small things that have happened that are important to the story, and we will get to her group eventually. when, as they say, when the shit hits the fan there in the Crystal City. So Athena wakes up, she goes about her day, and she ends up, she's a guard, she's a city guard. She ends up being on guard in the king's chambers when the rangers come back from their travels to find out what happened to the princess. And they have found her wagon train, all her retinue, her guards, all dead on the side of the road or scattered off the side of the road. The wagon has been burnt, and they find her dead body, sans head, of course, because the head was thrown over the wall. So she's in the king's room, the throne room, when the ranger reports to the king that they found that there were no survivors, the guards were shot full of arrows, the wagons were burned, and yes, I'm sorry, Your Majesty, we found your daughter's body amongst all the other bodies, and we brought her remains back so that you can bury her properly. And the king asks, do we have any idea who did it? And the ranger says, yes, we know exactly who did it, and he produces some arrows that he took out of the body. And the arrows have a lime green and a dark green fletching on each one of the arrows, which is Ash's colors. So from this, they assume that Ash has attacked the princess's party when she was on her way to marry their prince and create the pact between the two cities to keep the peace. Of course, this makes the king very angry, and they don't really think it through too much. It just seems obvious to them who did it, and so the ranger goes out. And later on that day, Athena, as she's coming home, she's walking through the streets, and she sees an army marching through the streets. And she comes along a crowd of people, and she sees the king up on the parapet giving a speech, and he talks about how Ash has committed treachery against them, killed his daughter, your beloved princess, and the crowd is very upset about this. The princess was very well loved within the city. And so when the king says to them that we're going to war with Ash, cheers erupt, and everybody's very happy, and banners are flying, and the army is leaving the city to go attack Ash. Now, at least the king didn't get too crazy. He's sending half of his army. He's keeping the other half back to protect the city in case anything should happen. But he does send half of his army towards Ash. Now, it should be said that the princess's head being thrown over the wall, the arrows and the guards and whatnot, that's all a setup by Prince Larkin's agents. He set this up before he even went to go get the piece of the obsidian crystal. He's got a small retinue of an army down there already, hiding in the woods, and he sends them messengers back and forth so he can direct them. And probably a week ago, he had directed them to do this at a certain timing. So he knows this is going to happen, and this is what they've done. They've set it up so that the king of the Crystal City thinks that Ash has committed treachery upon his daughter, and to try and start a war so they can weaken the Crystal City before he comes there and attacks them with his army. And it's working. So Athena knows about this, but she's just a guard in the king's guard, and she's struggling, trying to figure out what can I do about this. So we switch from her over to just a fun little thing I did with Yuli, Lazra, and Sable from the old Prince Larkin group. Since Prince Larkin opens the gate to go get the Gith army, that gate being open allows the connection to be made for them to those three characters that were from Prince Larkin's group. But of course now he's stranded them in this other world. So they wake up in a jail cell in this other world, the Delwood County Jail. They don't know what's going on. Mike's character, Lazra, is able to cast a spell to turn himself into a chimpanzee, and he uses that ability to get themselves out of the cell. And they end up walking around town for a little bit. They find the museum where they found the shard of the crystal earlier. And then at some point while they're walking around the city, the screen kind of goes for them and cuts off because the gate gets closed again. Once that happens and they're no longer in Lazara, Yulia, and Sable's bodies, the whole group wakes up again in the Hobbits' bodies over in the Elven Kingdom. And Tavia specifically wakes up to find her, Zenobia, I should say, wakes up to find herself in Tavia's body. And she's in one of the fairly larger rooms in the tree. And there's a big group of elves gathered around her, and she just has their rapt attention. And she looks down and she sees that she's holding a beautiful lyre that she is not familiar with. And she realizes that as Tavia, she must have been singing a bunch of songs to the elves, and that's why she has their rapt attention. And just as she's figuring this out, some of the elves are like, "Play another one, play another one!" And she hears that from several different people, and she's a little put off because she's not the bard, Tavia's the bard. But she goes along and she's like, "Can I think of a song?" And I said, "Yeah, you think of the song about birds in the brook and the meadows, and it's one of Tomlin's favorite songs, so that's why you think of it." And so she sings this song on the lyre. Zenobia kind of relaxes and lets Tavia take the lead, so to speak, and she uses her bard's powers to play this song for the elves. And you can see it lightens the moods of the elves. They go from being very rapt, almost having tears in their eyes, to jovial and laughing and clapping and enjoying themselves. And she finishes the song. By the time she finishes the song, not only is Tomlin in the room, but also all the rest of the hobbits have woken up and have made their way to this room and got to listen to about half of this song that Tavia plays, with Zenobia playing her. So the song ends and the elves start to file out, and as each of them passes the group of hobbits that have come in the door, they pay homage to the hobbits either with a nod, a hand to the shoulder. One of them even hugs Brno, startling him, and then they leave the room, and all that's left is the high priestess and I think it was 6 or 7 elves. And each of those elves, other than the high priestess, comes up to one of the hobbits and gives them a special gift from their heart to each of the hobbits, and they each get something. Tavia has already gotten the lyre. A couple of the important things that they got: Eldo got a map that does not show the walls of a dungeon or rooms or whatever that they're in, but it shows on the map where secret doors are at, and the like. And you can move around, and the map moves, basically making sure that you always stay in the center. They also gave Hannah a ring of elven magic, which sounds pretty cool, and is actually even cooler than it sounds. Hannah has always wished she was a magician. She's never felt that she was smart enough to learn the spells, and so she ended up becoming a monk. And this ring of elven magic will give her the ability to cast magic spells. It's patterned mostly after a druid, but there are going to be specific spells that aren't in any book that she'll get that are specific to elves in my campaign. So that's pretty cool for her. The other important thing that the high priestess gives to one of the hobbits is she gives to Laudus an amulet that protects him from detection and possession. And it's an amulet that she made specifically for him, knowing that this would happen. She had it ready for him so that it would permanently block Larkin from ever taking him over in Larkin's dream state ever again. So that's the other special item that they get. And then with that, the high priestess serves them one last meal. So as they're eating, Briaga pipes up and says to the high priestess, "Hey, we found this large emerald ring. Do you know anything about it?" And the priestess looks puzzled, and she obviously doesn't know anything about it. Braga continues and asks her, "We came across this tablet that we saw you writing. What about that?" And the high priestess looks at her, and she says, How do you know this?" And Braga gets a kind of a confused look on her face. And at first, as the DM, I'm thinking that she doesn't trust the high priestess, and she's trying to figure out how much to tell her. And Briaga says, I just had a dream. I just wanted to ask you about it." The high priest looks at her closely, and I make a roll, and I see that the high priestess is not buying her BS, doesn't believe her. So the high priestess looks at her, and she says, straight at Briaga, she says, I have been very honest with you. So I'll ask you again. How did you find out that I wrote the tablet? And so Braga hems and haws a little bit, and then it becomes obvious to all of us at the table that it's not that she's trying to hide anything from the high priestess. She doesn't remember, and we all got a good laugh out of that. It was a funny moment, and then the group talked amongst themselves to remind everyone how that happened, and then she shared that with high priestess, and everything was good. So the high priestess explains that yes, she wrote the 2 tablets. It was meant to be an orc prophecy. She placed it in a place where they would find it and think that that's what it was. And it's meant to get them to help out in this situation, because otherwise, it's going to go down the tubes, and Prince Larkin is going to be successful at putting the piece of crystal back together, and all mayhem is going to break loose. So now the High Priestess knows that their other group has one of the tablets, one of the 2 tablets. And she thinks about this for a minute. She says, she gets this quizzical look on her face, and then she says, that must be what's wrong. That's why the orcs aren't acting the way they're supposed to. She thinks about it for another minute, and she says, I would like to charge you with getting that 2nd tablet back to the orc chieftain. Will you accept this quest? And, of course, they're heroes, they're adventurers. That's kind of the point of being at the table. They think about it for a little bit, and then they say, yes, we'll do it. Now, of course, the hobbits are all very concerned about how the other group's going to pull that off. There's some discussion around the table about the fact that they got some orc clothing while they were in the orcs training area, so maybe they can use that. And there's just a little bit of discussion about it, and then the meal breaks up, and all the hobbits go back to their room. Now, I'm thinking the next discussion is going to be more of the same. How are we going to get the tablet back? But it completely switches. They start talking about whether or not they really want the pieces of the crystal to be attached to the obsidian crystal, or whether they want to prevent it, which seems to be the quest that the High Priestess wants them to do, to prevent it. But there's some discussion amongst the group about this. They're not sure. Maybe they do want the pieces attached. So they talk about this for a little bit, and they decide finally that the only way they can figure out this conundrum is to go to the Crystal City, go to the library in the Crystal City, which, of course, it being the biggest city, must be the best library, and see if they can find some information on this to make an educated decision on whether to help Prince Larkin or try and stop him. Which I thought was kind of cool. Wasn't what I expected. Bodaway, Mike's character, had been having that discussion within himself, and had been talking about possibly convincing the other characters, but I honestly didn't think that there was going to be any serious discussion about it amongst the other characters. But there was. In fact, they took to it right away. So that was interesting. Once again, the scene switches, and 2 of the characters find themselves in Bella and Sowina, 2 of the NPCs that are part of Prince Larkin's group. Now, those 2 players weren't here for the first session, so Sowina and Bella have never been played by a PC. So for that reason, Prince Larkin never suspected them. There was no evidence of them being taken over by a dream state from someone else. So he didn't strand those 2 in the other world. So when it comes time to dream of Prince Larkin, those 2 are still there. And they wake up to find themselves being Sowina and Bella. And they see Prince Larkin, Malin, and some of the guards. And they see the burnt out remains of a wagon and a couple of dead guards. Obviously, Prince Larkin is a little bit injured. He's getting tended to. And as they relax and let the memories of Sowina and Bella roll over them, they realize that a dragon attacked the party, Prince Larkin's party, sometime after they had brought the piece of obsidian crystal over from the other world. Now, the piece of obsidian crystal is still sitting there in the center of the charred remains of the wagon, but there's really not much wagon left, so they don't have a way of transporting this at this moment. And Prince Larkin, a couple seconds after they come in, turns to them and says, "Wait here," and him and Malin go back through the gate and disappear for about 5 hours. And Bella and Sowina sit here and wait for them to come back. Eventually, they come back. Prince Larkin and Malin walk back through the gate. And then shortly thereafter, some alien creatures start walking out of the gate. The aliens, they have a greenish tinge to their skin. They have pointed ears and sharp features. Their clothing is ornamented with feathers and colored beads, maybe some gems or some metals. They're definitely not human. And it seems, as more and more of them come out, that Prince Larkin and Malin have went and got themselves an alien army that they're bringing over to this world. Now, the army is mostly foot soldiers, but they have swordsmen, pikemen, archers. They have some mounted cavalry, some shock troops. They also have some siege engines, and all this comes through the gate. And then finally, when it seems like they've come to the end, there's literally thousands of soldiers that are quickly forming up into formation, and it seems like nothing else is coming out of the gate. There's about a 15-second pause, and then a dragon's head comes through the gate. And then slowly this gigantic red dragon with its wings folded as close tightly to its body as it can to squeeze through the gate, comes through the gate with a rider mounted on its neck, and it makes its way down the ramp. And that is the last thing that comes out of the gate. So now the characters don't count the army, but there's an army of approximately 5,000 Githyanki soldiers here. And of course the dragon rider is Githyanki as well. The dragon is an ancient red dragon, very powerful. And this is the army that Prince Larkin is going to take down there and join his little contingent army and put them all together, and he plans on raising the Crystal City if he has to in order to get into the castle. Now I should mention that that after Prince Larkin was kicked out of Laudus's body by the High Priestess, he thought long and hard about all the things that he had learned while he was spying on the other group, or at least dreaming that he was one of them. And one of the main things that he knows about that the players may or may not be thinking about is he knows about the Hall of Faces. So not only does he know about the Gate of Worlds, but he knows about the Hall of Faces. And the Gate of Worlds is not capable of transporting anyone anywhere within the Five Kingdoms. It doesn't work like that. That's just not what it's for. The Gate of Worlds goes to other worlds. It's the only place you can go to. Now you can go to multiple different worlds, not as many now as you could have before the pieces of the obsidian crystal were broken off, because there's less worlds were attached to it. But there's plenty of worlds out there to go to. However, he knows from being with the hobbits as Laudus that the Hall of Faces can take you to places within the Five Kingdoms as well as places outside of the Five Kingdoms. So because of that, he hatches this plan to send his army down to attack the Crystal City with Malin at its head, along with the commander of the Githyanki army, to go attack the city. He is going to travel by faster means with a ship, go down the river past Crystal City and go over to Land's End, land, and then cross over to the Great Cavern and go to the Hall of Faces. Now he's going to take a contingent of Githyanki with him, along with some of his soldiers to carry the piece of the obsidian crystal, and he's going to go through the back door, as it were. This was not part of my original plan, but after Laudus got kicked out, I thought about it. What would I do if I was Larkin? And that was one of the big pieces of information that he had. So he decides this is what he's going to do. So that's his plan going forward. And Selena and Bella get to see the army coming out, so they get to see that part of the plan and report that back to the group. Now, Selena is, I should say Zenobia is Dragonborn. So she has dragon ancestry, and she can speak dragon. She can speak Draconic. So even as Selena, she has this ability. So she decides that she's going to go talk to the dragon. So she waits until the dragon gets settled, and then she walks over. Actually, I think she walked over and started talking to it a little bit while it was coming down off the gate. And then once it gets settled, she casts an invisibility spell and she goes over and talks to the dragon. Now, this was a very, very dangerous thing for her to do. Even being Dragonborn, if the dragon takes a disliking to her, there's any number of things he could do himself, let alone, alert the army or whatever. So I had the dragon roll a reaction, and I gave her a little bit of the benefit of the doubt because she's speaking Draconic. That gives her a shoe in the door. And the rolls came out fantastic for her. So the dragon was, a modicum of friendly. Not super friendly. The red dragon's never really going to be super friendly to her, but was willing to talk to her, maybe out of boredom or whatnot, or maybe just thought it was really interesting that this foolish human comes over here to talk to him. Anyways, she gets a little bit of information out of him and then goes back to their camp, and that's where that ends. Then lastly, the characters found themselves in the tribal group again with Bodaway and Zenobia and the characters that they were playing in that group. And as you recall, they were on their way to the Necromancer's Lair. Now, technically speaking, they're not supposed to know it's a Necromancer's Lair, but they keep running across zombies, and they ran across skeletons, animated skeletons, right before they went to bed last time that they were in this group. So they wake up, they're in that camp, they find their way to the cave in the Necromancer's Lair, and they're making their way through there. A couple encounters they run along the way, which are not really important for our discussion. And finally, they reach the threshold of the Necromancer's throne room. Now this is very important. I've talked about this a couple times in previous sessions, that this encounter with the Necromancer, they're not meant to win this. In fact, I set it up so I can't imagine how they could possibly win it. This is an arch nemesis that I'm developing for them, that they will meet hopefully repeatedly throughout not only Act 1 of this campaign that I'm putting forward, but possibly Act 2. Well, definitely Act 2. That's where the main plan is, but we'll get to that later. Anyways, so they find the Necromancer's Lair, and this is the throne room that I described to them in the vision, with the 6 pillars, with the carpet going down the middle, the Necromancer seated on the throne with a giant skull hanging over him, and the 12 statues on the front and back of each of those columns, along with the 2 ogre zombies at the front. And so I describe it again. I describe it almost exactly the same way I described it before. And of course, now they're actually seeing the room on the screen that I display all the maps on. But they didn't get to see it themselves as the players last time. I just described it to them when they were seeing it in the Vision Stone. But I gave them a full description of it. And then when they see this, as they come up to this room, I tell them that you've seen this room before. Everyone here except for Bodaway feels like they have seen this room before. Now they're all confused because none of them remember the vision that they had of Bodaway running away from this room when they were using the Vision Stone. So they're all kind of quizzical, and they're asking me questions. And of course, most of the questions are framed in such a way, they're like, well, when were we here before? Where did we encounter this room? And I kind of hint to them, not so much that they feel like they've been in this room before, but that they feel like they've seen this room before. Still doesn't clue them in. They seem to be completely oblivious. And this is where I end the night. So I show them this room. I tell them they're on the threshold of it. Simon the Necromancer, whose name they don't know, but Simon the Necromancer goads them a couple of times by saying things like, I've been waiting for you, and don't let fear stop you. And so he goads them a couple times and trying to get them to come in the room, and then I stop it there for the night. It was a very busy session, but I really wanted to get to this point because I wanted to give the players the time to think about this from now until the next session, which in my campaign is about a month with this group, so we usually play about once a month. So they have a lot of time to think about it. Maybe, perhaps, I can generate some offline discussion between them. They all have each other's text information. We can connect on the Facebook group. So there's a number of different ways for them to communicate with each other, and I've tried to encourage this. And I haven't got a lot going on with that. Mike is the only player who really seems interested in talking about the campaign offline. But nonetheless, they have a month to do that. Up to them if they want to do it or not, and they can discuss amongst themselves to see if they can figure out, how and why they remember this room and what that means. And of course, I'm hoping they'll figure it out because I don't want to kill the characters. But on the other hand, it's really up to them to remember. I've given them the clues that they need to know to stay out of this room. And I mean, just looking at the room, if they walk up to it, they should know better than to go in. Granted, Bodaway and Zenobia are both 5th level characters, but the group that they're with are just NPCs. their only experience has been the day or two, I think it was 2 days of travel they spent on the way here, up until the point where they had the encounter with the skeletons. And so they're still first and second level. This tribal group is going on their walkabout or their 1 year excursion to find themselves. And so they're all newbies, they're wet behind the ears, first and second level. So for them to walk into this room would be quite deadly, even if it wasn't as nasty as it is. But we're talking about, I believe I have Simon as a 13th or 14th level necromancer. You got 2 ogre zombies, and then you have 12 wraiths that will come alive upon Simon's command and attack whoever's in the room. Their only saving grace is that the wraiths cannot leave the room. So if the players do retreat, once they cross the threshold, the wraiths can't follow them. Now, of course, Simon can still follow them if he chooses to, which he probably won't. He's just toying with them. And the ogre zombies could follow them, which they may or may not, depending on how close they are to the characters when they leave the room. So that's the setup, and I let that stew with the players. Now, I'm very interested to see what's going to happen. For the whole month between this campaign and between this session and the next session in the campaign, I'm on pins and needles too. I'm trying to answer their questions without giving it all away, and hoping that they'll figure this out. But I have no idea. I'm very curious to find out. So we'll wait till next session, and I'll tell you how that goes. Thanks for watching.